Yeah.
Where exactly?
They're actually from around Minnesota here, just outside Minneapolis. And they're young guys. Well, actually, no, Richie's not so young. The truth of the matter is the drummer that we've been using is a guy named Scott Tate, but he's injured himself. So the drummer we're coming in is a friend of mine, a guy named Richie. He's an excellent drummer, but the drummer we normally use is a guy named Scott Tate. He's 22 years old, and that's what I was going to say. Because the other guys are only 22 years old. AJ and Mike.
What in the devil are you doing in Minneapolis? You're not recording with Jam and Lewis, are you?
No. No, I live here. My wife is from a town called Hopkins, which is a suburb of Minneapolis.
Is that right?
Yeah, and when we had our children, I have two boys, and when we had the children, which is about 10 years ago now, we decided to move back to the Midwest to raise them up.
Is that right?
We wanted to raise them up around the family and you know, give them a bit of those values, you know. And it's been real nice. We're very happy here. Probably stay here at least until the children finish school, you know. We get a yearning for warmer climes sometimes, you know.
But then again, you're from Liverpool originally, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So I guess it's sort of second nature to you, isn't it?
That's right, yeah. It gets cold and rainy in Liverpool, yeah.
There was always this impression, I think, among the average fan that Badfinger was a band riddled by tragedy, which, to a degree, is true, I suppose.
Well, yeah.
You know, the main problems were, of course, the suicides, but I guess there is also sort of a history of other problems as well. One of the questions here is maybe you could explain, like, what are some of the main problems the band faced?
The biggest problem we ever had was the business management of the band. We were kind of hippies, really, in our outlook towards life, and we tended to trust everybody. And we got these business managers to look after the money we were making, and they spent it all. They just kind of took it and spent it, and that really kind of destroyed us, really. They lied to us about the record companies. They lied to us about each other. They just kind of broke the whole thing off, you know. That was the worst thing that happened, I think.
Now, is that what made Pete Ham despondent?
Well, I don't know. What happened there was in '74, in August, we'd come back from America. We'd recorded the Wish You Were Here album at the Caribou Ranch in Colorado. And we'd gone back to London to finish it up. And right after recording, I went to Los Angeles for a couple of weeks holiday. And while I was there, I met some very influential people in the business and very knowledgeable people. One of them was a huge attorney. He was John Lennon's attorney, actually. And he told me a couple of stories which gave me the horrors. He told me it was common knowledge in the music business that this guy, Stanley Polly, was really creaming our band. And also that Stanley Polly had been shopping a solo deal for Peter Ham in Los Angeles. And, you know, he was doing all these outrageous things. He was doing them in New York, and he was just using all our money and spending it all. And I went back to England and told the band about this. My wife and I, actually, because my wife, Kathy, was at the same time good friends with May Pang. And it was, in fact, through that relationship that I got to meet this attorney. I should tell you, before I went back to England, I went to see Stan Polly, our business manager, and confronted him with this. And he didn't admit it, but he agreed to make a deal to get out of the business with us. We had to pay him a certain amount of money, and he would turn over all the contracts to us, and all the share certificates for Badfinger Enterprises. I went back to England and told the guys about this. Well, Tommy agreed. Tommy agreed with me, and I think Peter did, and Mike did too, that we should get new managers. And we went looking for new managers. Now, it so happens that one of the guys we went to see was a fellow named Barry Marshall, who's a very big promoter now in England. He just promoted the McCartney tour all over the world. We were in the office with Barry this day, and we get a phone call saying that Warner Brothers has cancelled our record deal and is suing the band. Now, I called my house when I heard this, and I asked Kathy, my wife, to get in touch with Warner's and ask them to get in touch with Warner's in America and see if our deal was okay. Because, our relationship with the record company was good. We got a telex back. We didn't have fax machines. We got a telex back saying everything okay. Warner Brothers, no bones with the band or something to that effect. In other words, everything was okay. I turned around and relayed this message to the band. Peter Ham stood up and left. He stood up and he said, I'm not having you managing the band. Kathy, he said, I'm not having Kathy running the band. Well, all Kathy had done was relay a message. He stood up and left the group right there at that time. Well, we had a tour booked in England a couple of weeks later, so we went and immediately started auditioning other players. Because to everybody else, I guess, outside the band, he was Peter Ham, this great, writer and everything. But to us, he was Pete, the guitar player in the band, and he'd left, so we had to replace him. So we got this keyboard player in, Bob Jackson, and we went to rehearsal. Anyway, a couple of weeks later, Pete came back in the band, and he said he wouldn't interfere anymore. He wouldn't be headstrong. He wouldn't be stubborn. He'd stand in the back. He'd keep his mouth shut. Everything would be cool. And I said, well, I don't really want you in the band if you're going to be like that. I'd much rather have you be, the guy you are. And if that's the way the band's going to be, if you're not going to make any changes with the management, if you're just going to go on like this, then there's no point in having a band. I'm leaving, and I left myself. And I did the tour, of course. Lived up to the commitment and everything, and I left the tour in November. I went to LA. Left the group in November of that year, 74, and went to live in Los Angeles with my wife. The manager, Polly, immediately told the group that he'd paid me $60,000, and he'd paid me off, and all of that stuff. And in fact, the exact opposite was true. He'd in fact hand-delivered a letter to me in Los Angeles, begging me to come back in the band, because Warner's knew that Pete had left, and now they knew I'd left, and their idea was that they'd cancel the contract. That was Warner could have cancelled the contract then. And at that time, and a lot of people aren't aware of this, but I wrote over 50% of the music that the band made. And I think it worried people when I left the band. Warner's wanted to cancel the deal. Polly somehow kept the deal together, and they went and recorded an album in London. The album was called Head First, and it was delivered, I think, in January of 1975. Warner Brothers refused to release the album and refused to pay for it. And that was the end of the rope then, because Polly, the manager, had spent every penny that the band had made up to that point, which was, we're talking about almost $7 million. He'd spent every penny, and the band was destitute now. So Pete and Tommy and Mike and this other guy, Bob Jackson, were in London. No money was coming from the managers. Warner Brothers weren't interested because the album didn't turn out good. And their personal manager, Bill Collins, had no idea what to do about anything. So in fact, I hate to say I told you so, but that was what it was like.
Wow. Well, that's an extraordinary chain of events, because almost nothing went right. It seems like everything worked against you.
That's right, and I think the one thing I've always had in my mind about Peter was that once he committed himself to something, he was like the captain on a ship. He wouldn't leave the ship. And I think because he committed himself wholeheartedly to Stan Polly and these people, I think when he found out that these people were in fact the ones that had done him and sunk his ship, that broke his band up, and really brought his life to a total standstill, I think that's what put him over the edge.
Wow, so you can in fact attribute his suicide to Polly's...
well, there was a note left when he died, Peter. He left a note. He said, the normal kind of messages to his girlfriend, his wife, actually, Anne Ferguson, and their baby that she was expecting, and it's the people around him. And then it went on to say, and I'm going to take that soulless bastard, Polly, with me. That's what he wrote in his note.
Wow.
It was all this stuff, we told Rolling Stone and all the big hit magazines this at the time, but none of them ever printed it.